Let's do business. Kenya will have to borrow close to 1 trillion shillings to plug the deficit in its budget for the next financial year if proposals by the National Treasury through the draft budget policy statement are anything to go by. To finance the 3 trillion shilling budget for the 2021-2022 financial year, the National Treasury expects a total revenue of 1.9 trillion shillings, boosted by a 12% increase in ordinary revenues, which are expected to stand at 1.8 trillion shillings. The 938 billion shillings deficit is expected to be plugged through borrowing 592 billion shillings in the domestic market and 345 billion shillings externally. The national government expenditure is expected to increase by 5.3% to 1.98 trillion shillings, even as allocation to the judiciary will be slashed by a whopping 81 million shillings. With 8 out of every 10 jobs in Kenya created in the informal economy, the Kenya Union of Domestic Hotel and Education Institutions has called upon the government to fast-track plans to certify persons working in the informal sector. Secretary General Albert Njeru says the union is working closely with the National Industrial Training Institute with the view of equipping workers in the Juakali sector with requisite skills. The union argues that certification of workers in the informal sector will enable them to leverage their skills for upward socio-economic mobility.
We are saying this is a time to bring together all the workers, both formal and informal, to make sure that the workers are recognized by the government of the day, to make sure that the employers and everybody else can realize we need the young people, women, and above all, those people who don't have the skills, they can be trained.
With only 4 days left to the deadline for the public submissions of comments on the draft national payment strategy for the period 2021 to 2025, a section of fintech analysts have touted the draft regulations as a step in the right direction, particularly around the provisions for open banking. The strategy is expected to help Kenya make a leap into the frontier of the payments architecture. Julian Samboko with the details.
Open infrastructure is identified as one of the strategic pillars of the draft National Payment System Strategy for the period 2021 to 2025. Essentially, open infrastructure would create a window for third-party financial service providers to have open access to consumer banking, transaction and other financial data from banks and non-bank financial institutions. Samora Kariuki, a fintech pundit and financial analyst, argues this would be a major step for the country.
So open banking in this context essentially means that banks, by mandate, will have to share customer data if the customer consents to a third party. And the main thing for this thing to really take off, open banking, is first, you just have to create, proper policies and guidelines surrounding, secure data exchange between banks and third parties.
But how different will this be from the present provision for sharing of credit information between lenders?
With the credit data, it's very binary data. It's, defaulted or not defaulted, right? Good or bad, yes or no. It's binary in a sense. Whereas open banking, it enables you to share the full picture. So for instance, in your case, you could share the last 6 months, bank statements, average balance for the last X period, how often you transact in a day and a week, and someone can be able now to paint a clearer picture of who you are.
The draft national payment strategy is also expected to help the Central Bank of Kenya develop a payments infrastructure tailored to meet the needs of payments at the bottom of the economic pyramid, something which is presently lacking in the market.
If you look at the payments architecture of Kenya, you've got your higher level payments that go through Kenya Electronic Payment Services. So this is the RTGS, EFT, And then you have the National Automated Clearing House, which is now checks and EFT. So there's no lower value payment system designed by the central bank.
Members of the public are required to give their feedback on the draft strategy to the Central Bank of Kenya by the close of January 28, 2021. Julian's Amboko, NTV.
Just before we close, economic analysts are now calling for caution in the interpretation of growth numbers being tabled as forecasts for growth by African countries in 2021. Standard Bank head of Africa Research, Gibran Qureshi, says that the projections for robust growth largely reflect rebounds from the contraction posted by most countries in 2020, as opposed to tangible gains being realized in the day-to-day activity by businesses and households. Standard Bank is banking on the gradual rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine to further improve recovery prospects in 2021.
The second quarter in all African countries, because in Q2 2020 we saw the worst shock since data collection began in Africa, there has to be an unwinding of a base effect. Not because the economy will necessarily be improving dramatically. Now we know that we hope by the second half of 2021 there will be a better rollout and availability of the vaccines in advanced economies, which perhaps will be able to springboard or support our services and tourism sectors